Hi, I'm Gretchen, and today we are going to take a basic terracotta pot and turn it into something pretty. If you hang out until the end of the video, I will give you some different applications and show you some other samples and things I've done with it with different napkins, etc. But right now I'm going to go ahead and get started because I know some people like to go right to work. Okay. So before we get to work, the one thing I do always like to do is give instructions in a way that if you've never decoupaged before, you can pick it right up. So I've got pretty much everything I need. I'm going to do a whole video on this, but when you are working on your project, one really important thing you're going to figure out is what napkin are you going to use. You can also use tissue. You can use tissue that you've printed on, which I've done quite a bit, which I love, which I'll do another lesson on that. But today, I think I'm going to work with this one because I'm most asked how to work with a continuous scene. That's what people find most difficult. That being said, if you are a beginner and you want to go for something simple, anything like this with a white background, if you're using like a soft white paint, these are particularly easy because you can take smaller sections and easily keep the wrinkles and the creases out. I also think this one's really fun. I wanted to potentially work with this, but because of the darker background, it can be a little bit more difficult to piece together. And there's not a lot of non-design room to kind of work with. So I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it for keep it for another project. But today we're going to work with this one. I actually made one using this napkin and it was early on and it's a little bumpier than I am comfortable with. So I thought this would be a great way. And also to kind of just show you how easy it can be to piece things together, especially like this where it's light and dark. So the first thing we're going to do, if you have a napkin, is we're going to remove the back of the napkin. This is a 3-ply napkin. Most good napkins are. This is a Caspari napkin, by the way. People ask me all the time what my favorite napkins are. The reason I like Caspari is because they're really, really great pigment and they don't tend to run. This one's going to come off awfully easily. They don't always come off that easily. There, if you look, there are 2 layers. I love using this lint roller because it gives me a little bit more control. You can also take painter's tape. Some people wet their fingers to separate it, but that's just kind of an easy way. And then I just keep a little bucket on the side of my workstation so I can put those extra layers to good use. I am going to go ahead and get my station a little bit cleared off so that I can. So let's get this started. When you're doing this, do pay attention to where that is. You don't want to start that at the top. Let's put some sky at the top so that that castle is going to fall on the face of the spot. So we're going to just kind of give a little excess here. This is a water pen. I love that versus having to dip it in water. A lot of people like to use water to get their images out of the napkin because it gives it that kind of nice frayed edge, which tends to disappear. And then if you just pull it away, you'll get, if I did that right, I would have gotten it right, a section. So that's going to be kind of the primary spot that we're going to work with initially. Let's see, did I get enough sky? I'll have to keep that down farther. So it'll be fine. I can patch that in, and it's actually kind of good that that happens so I can show you. I had it here, but not there. So I'm just going to continue doing that by piecing out sections that I can pull together. Okay, so I just take something and put a little bit of saran wrap over it so that I can tilt it. This helps me kind of put the image on. It's harder for me to work from the side. I work while I'm standing, so that's easier. This is my varnish. It's the Duraclear Gloss. I use it as the glue and the varnish. I love it. And I just dump it into a big jar because I'm using it a lot and I don't want to have to put it like kind of on a tray. But what you're going to do is give yourself a nice coating. This is where I think one of the problems I made when I first started decoupaging, I put way too much varnish on. Now because that caused lots of wrinkles and creases. Since this is on chalk paint, it's also going to absorb a little bit of that, which is good because it's not all sitting on the surface. But I kind of want to put this, I want to make sure it's actually a tiny bit askew on the image I've discovered in all this time I've used it. And then all I'm gonna do is place it down, then I'm gonna wrap my fingers in this, and from the center out, if you can see, I'm just gonna work my way. And then in here, when you start to get little tiny creases, first of all, those pushed right out, but if they don't, try and push them out into the white section. So if you don't use too much varnish too, you can even pick it back up. I got a crease right there I didn't want. You can go, let's see, am I dragging? So you're gonna wanna, play with it a little bit. The reason this first layer is so important is because really this is gonna be the most important stage. It's gonna set it so that this is, looks the way we want it to. There's a tiny wrinkle there, but I don't know if I care. Okay, and right here I have this part, and I know it's gonna wrinkle because it's kind of taut. So what I'm gonna do is cut that little section because it's gonna give me a little bit of, okay, so I cut that little piece and it tore a little bit, but as you can see, you can even really, I'm gonna take that section out because I don't like it. Things were going so well. All right, well, I'm leaving that in because I feel like that's really frustrating when you're working on these things, and if you don't ever see it happen to somebody that does decoupage all the time, you feel like you're doing something wrong and you're not. It's just that I think one of the most important skills that we all have as people who've done a lot of decoupage is how to fix things. So that's all gonna be fine. You'll be really thrilled with how that all comes out ultimately. But anyway, if you push it all through, as you can see, that is, first of all, it's really cute, but it's gonna be really pretty. So I'm gonna take this bottom and I'm gonna trim it. So I'm gonna leave a tiny bit of extra because I'm gonna kind of gather it around the bottom because I'd like it to just kind of neatly tuck under because I don't want to have kind of the final edge there. But I can take it, as you see, this pot has a little crack, but I don't care because I want it to have drainage anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And so then I'm just taking my brush and pulling that bottom layer down. Now I was so light with the first one, I can now go ahead and put a little bit more on my brush and kind of give that a coat. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to ultimately probably put a little gold on the top, so I don't mind, but even there you can't see it. It's pretty much disappeared. I made the real mistake in the beginning of using a really rough brush. This is a really soft brush. I, again, will link that too, but it is great because it doesn't tend to pull on the napkin at all. So what I'm going to do now is piece around to the rest of it. I don't need to make you guys go through all of that, but I do want to show you kind of just how easy this particular thing is to work with. So this was from here. Now, one thing you're going to see is because of the curve and the bowing, I'm going to end up getting a little bit of gap. No problem. But the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and kind of cut off some of that extra on the bottom with my pen. As you'll see, I do go back and forth between using a water pen and scissors depending on the application. But I'm going to put a little layer right here. I don't want to touch this part because it's still wet. I've done that before and then pulled it up. And I'm also careful of not turning it as far as I normally would. I'll go ahead and do that so you can see it, but you have to be really careful because that side's still wet. Normally I'd wait a little bit longer perhaps in between, but I'm just gonna then kind of piece this in right here. And I want it to be straight up and down. So even though I know I'm leaving this big gap, the point for me is when this finished product comes together, I really want it to look like a continuous scene, but I'm gonna have to make that happen. Okay, so then I'm going to go in, and one thing to be careful of as well is make sure that you don't have much stickiness or varnish. You can actually, sometimes I'll just refold it. Like that one I could feel is a little tacky from the last one that the last pass I did, and that will make it start to pull on the napkin. And I don't want to do that. If you find that like I didn't paint the top part, Go very lightly. And then I kind of want to make sure I get in that groove right there. And then I'll push this up and out. And typically you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to start from the center and kind of work your way out, coaxing. And you'll see that, if you can see that tiny wrinkle there. Once I put another layer on, that has disappeared. I can see. And sometimes I'll just, some people do what they call dry brushing it, where you, I don't know why they call it that, because it's not really dry, but I guess when it's dry and then you're using your wet brush to go over it and just adhere it without putting it any at the base. But I have better luck doing this. So then I've got this last spot. So what I'm going to do now is go through and pick out a couple things that I think might work in there. I could do those little trees. I think that actually would look really good, even though that's not where it's from. And I always tell myself my videos are going to be really short, and then I find myself not wanting to skip important parts. So fast forward if you find this part boring, but I feel like this is the part that really helps people learn how to bring their projects up a level. And it's not necessarily intuitive if you haven't done it before. So fast forward if you don't want to see this part, but so I feel like if we put that in there, it's going to make sense. What do you think? Hopefully you agree. Now I've got too much on the top bottom, and I know there's a tree there, and that's the beautiful thing, especially about toile, because it inherently has trees and scenes that are kind of above and below, like in a fabric, that don't necessarily make sense. And so that makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so there we go. Now I've overlapped that tree maybe a little more than I'd like, and even this front part a little more, but I didn't want there to be a big gap. But when you're looking at it, obviously, one thing that's nice with something like this that's smaller, you can only see this surface. Then you see that it's a little off. Okay, so this might not be my day, but this did not work very well, so I actually just took it and rubbed it off, and I'm going to put another section in. And this is a great time to mention my golden rule, which is never, ever, ever throw a project away. Keep powering through. And if in the end you don't like it, then you're allowed to pitch it. And I'll tell you why. I cannot even tell you the number of things I thought I would throw away, and ultimately it turned out just fine. So if you see, I just kind of pieced that in there. And I did pick a tree that had some dark around it, so it would kind of blend right in there, but look how nice that looks. And then I'm just going to steal a little bit of this sky in the shape of that little section. And because of the way, and this I'm tearing, because of the way this napkin works, it doesn't have to be the perfect size for that area, because it can kind of just lay over it. And look. The great news is you really, if you're looking at it, would never know that that was pieced in. So then I'm going to fill in the rest of this top and continue around the rest of the pot. I'll be back. I'm going to pop in for this quick tip. If you've watched any of my other videos, you have already seen this. Well, this is actually 2 tips in 1. I put this sky in right here, and I left a tiny gap. Not intentionally, but what I'm going to do is piece in a little piece of sky that I tore out. I'm going to put a tiny bit of varnish on my brush. I'm going to pick up the piece and lay it in there. That's easier, so I don't have to touch it. But an even better tip is I use the back side of the napkin so that I go with the washed out pigment. So when I lay it over, it's not so much darker, if that makes sense, and keeps me from having 2 times the pigment, and I find it blends in much nicer. Well, normally I'd let this dry a little longer, but I'm just going to show you real quick. On these edges, the way I'm going to get a clean cut at the top is using a nail file. I've also got square buffing blocks and I use those a lot. I like those because they've got control, but this is a nice sharp one. So I'm always going to go away from the edge. I don't want to go down or I'm going to pull the napkin, but as you see, if I go in this direction, and I do want it to be dry so I'm not leaving any residue that's going to look yucky when I put my top coat of varnish. But as you see, that just cleaned it off perfectly in that section. Okay, so I let that napkin layer go ahead and dry up a little bit, and now I'm going to put a layer of varnish, and I've just inverted it over a cup. So I'm going to go with a light layer. I'm going to try to go top to bottom, and I'm just going to really kind of manage how much I put on. I really don't want it to be, I'm going to do probably 2-3 coats. This I probably won't pot directly in. I think I'm going to buy a little ornamental plant and put it in it as a hostess gift. So I'm not going to put dirt in this. I believe you could. This Duraclear should seal it strong enough that you should be able to do that, but I just have never done that because I like being able to kind of change them out. One thing you're going to be careful of, obviously, is when you go down to the bottom, just making sure that you don't have anything falling on the lip. You don't want any drips. And usually what I'll do after I go through this coat, I have this great little turntable that makes it kind of easy for me to do this fairly easily. I do a lot of decoupage bottles. That's probably one of the things I've done the most in this little adventure of decoupage, and this makes it really easy, really on anything, to spin it while you're putting your varnish on. So I've got my little coat of varnish on. I'm making sure that it's even all the way around. That's coat number 1, and the last thing I'm going to do is take the bottom of my brush, run it around the bottom, and just really lightly go around the edge. 1, because I want to make sure there's a good seal of varnish, and 2, because I want to make sure I don't have any drips. So I'm going to repeat that. I probably will repeat that 2 more times. I know it's hard to see because it's on this angle, but if you see, I've just got a really nice light layer going all over the piece. Okay, so I'm going to let those both dry in between the final coat, and then I'll show you what the final product looks like. Okay, so this is all done. I put a couple coats on. It looks great. I think it's just a really sweet kind of a feel. And as you'll see, when I filed the top, I actually don't even mind it. I think it's got a kind of a good look, but I'm going to go ahead just to kind of finish this off and use my Krylon gold leafing pen to put just a quick layer of gold on the top. And I usually try and keep this little shell here so I've got like a good coat. I don't want too much because I don't want it to drip down, but I'm basically just going to go over. Let me get this. I'm trying to make sure you can see it, but that I'm also having it at a good angle. So I'm basically going to go through and just kind of paint this over the edge. It'll give this nice, sweet kind of gold rim. Hopefully you can see, and finish it off. So I hope you've had fun, and I appreciate that you spent spending some time with me today learning how to do this. I hope you found it helpful. And I look forward to doing it a little bit more. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more new videos. I'm finally getting several out in a row that I hope are helpful and give you some creative ideas. Thanks. So this is the part for people who want a little bit of extra information about the project. And I love giving little ideas on how to use these things, especially because if you're like me and you love creating them, but you don't necessarily want them all hoarded in your home, it's really fun to think of great ways to use them as gifts. And I think this is just the sweetest little hostess gift. I love how the pot came out with that little bit of gold trim, not too much. This is a tiny little plant I got, and I loved the green with the blue. But I just think that is such a sweet thing. I can tie a ribbon around it, but it's a great little gift to take. It's fun because it's something that you made and it's something that lasts. And then also, like I did a larger one a while back. This one's a little bit rougher, but is also still cute. Put one of their roses in. And then I was looking through a cabinet that I have where I keep like old pots and vases and things with flowers. And I found this big white one that I was going to get rid of, and then realized that it might be cute for Christmas to give as a hostess gift with these little Santas. It's not complete yet, so it's got them all over. I haven't finished the back part yet, but I think it's turning out super cute. This is a Norfolk pine, which I actually got one of these as a hostess gift a couple years ago, and it's still growing strong. So that's really sweet. These also are pots, just to give you a feel for, you know, we've got the blue and white and a little bit more traditional, but this is a pot that I made for my daughter. It was an orchid had come in it as a gift, and I kept it. And she did her dorm room last year, kind of a little boho. And I had this napkin, but I only had one. She loved it. All the colors were right. And it wasn't quite big enough, but also when you have two darks, sometimes it can be tough to match them up. So I just took the gold that I used in the top, and I kind of filled it in and brushed it in all the cracks. And I love how it turned out. And she had kind of a big viney plant that came out of it in her dorm. And it was a really cool little thing just that was added from home. So just to give you a couple ideas, I've also used them. I stick a bunch of paint brushes and some old ones that I have too, which is kind of nice in my craft room. So just a couple of thoughts on how you can possibly use them. I hope you had fun and learned a lot and make something special.